The British obsession with Waterloo is such that in Victorian times people flocked to see Captain Cyborg's immaculate models of the battle, paying £1 a time to do so.
Thousands and thousands did go and see the model, not only in London, but for the smaller one it travelled as well. Indeed, it eventually ended up in Berlin, of all places. It depicts 2 to 2:30 in the afternoon when the charge of the British cavalry under Uxbridge was sent to disrupt the advance of de Lyon's corps of infantrymen.
Also currently on display at the Royal Armouries in Leeds is this painting depicting the same charge. Elizabeth Butler's vision of that glorious moment shows how Waterloo didn't just define England's relationship with Europe, it also cemented British national unity. The painting is called Scotland Forever, the charge of the Royal Scots Greys, but in fact at the time of the battle they weren't called that, they were called the Royal North British Dragoons, because mention of the word Scotland was taboo to British officialdom. A stain from the Jacobite risings of the 18th century still remained. After Waterloo, Scotland could be used again, the Union was cemented. In miniature, the suffering of those who fought, their myriad identities, and the confused movements of the day can all be abstracted, simplified. On the fields themselves south of Brussels, it's easier to understand that then, as now, people from all over Europe came to this killing ground. Wellington's army was only 35% British, something Victorian jingoists preferred to forget, but those who've commanded more recent multinational operations appreciate all too well.
So you have Brunswickers, you have Nassauers, you have Dutchmen, you have Belgians, many of whom had fought under the eagles of Napoleon in the Grand Army. You've got the King's German Legion, you've got Hanoverians. So it's very much an allied multinational army, a bit like NATO today, perhaps.
Well, I've got to say, it proves the viability of the European army, doesn't it, Richard?
Well, it proves the viability of a multinational army if the core of it and the heart of it is a strong. Put it this way: yes, if it's got a strong framework nation.
Thousands of reenactors are now converging here. This group portrays the King's German Legion, who served the Elector of Hanover, who happened also to be King of England. Waterloo was a German victory, they told me off camera, and it was also, they say, the start of a recognisably modern Europe.
For us it was a victory for peace in Europe for a long time, and like I told you, the beginning of the startup for democracy in Europe. So I think there was not a winner on one side.
It was in places like La Haye Sainte, a breakwater against the tide of advancing French, that Wellington's Germans sold their lives dearly and helped him win the battle. Today's owner is hosting reenactors tonight, but as to the people more generally who knock on her door, there are not so many Germans, and one nation in particular predominates.
Most of the large majority are British, then Germans, French. They are all on the same level. Sometimes I have Spanish, sometimes I have Australians, but I have a large majority British, and then the rest of the world.
La Haye Sainte figured prominently on 2 of the Cyborg models. But on the larger one, Wellington ordered the number of Prussians shown to be reduced. He didn't want them taking too much credit. But in 1857, when Daniel Maclise was preparing a monumental depiction for the House of Lords, Wellington was dead, the Prussians in favour at court, and a fairer portrayal imperative.
It obviously is showing how the British and the Prussians had an equal measure. I think they were a lot more comfortable at this time with accrediting the Prussians with part of the victory at Waterloo, because without them it probably would not have happened as a victory.
Today, Prince Charles unveiled a new monument on the battlefield. Not for the first time, Britain's relationship with Europe is in a state of flux, and the lessons of the battle being reinterpreted in the light of today's political realities.
Waterloo is interesting because it's won by the forces of reaction, and Blucher and Wellington are supreme reactionaries. In a sense, beating the forces unleashed by the French Revolution, but it's the forces released by the French Revolution, nationalism, which prevail in the 19th century. Of course, for the British, it allows Britain to turn its back on Europe. Some might say part of Britain is still looking to turn its back on Europe and establish the Second British Empire. So the 19th century becomes the British century as a result of Waterloo.
Well, there's no mistaking the scale of interest in this 200th anniversary when the big reenactment happens here in this natural arena on the Saint-Jean Ridge on Saturday. There will be tens of thousands of paying spectators. For the British, perhaps, it's a chance to relive a moment of national destiny. For the French to reflect on the greatness of Napoleon, and for the Germans and others to recognise their own place in this history.